702.
Change your mindset.
Stanley Beckett is my guest, author and consultant at Changecreator SA. Stanley, good evening. We go back to the conversation around how do you regain your faith for the things that you want to achieve. And I just made the comment earlier on to say that there is, of course, the danger into going into a religious conversation. But I also am comforted by that to say, if that's the platform upon which we can start to have conversation of this nature, then yeah, let's go for it. But as you know, religion can get a little bit hairy sometimes in terms of its emotiveness. So I'm going to leave it to you as to where do you want to start? Where do you want to take us this evening?
Good evening, Aubrey. Good evening to you. Good evening to the listeners. And I was thinking about how to position this, that it's a little bit different. And that's the reason I readdressed the subject tonight, because I felt like last week we went a little bit off track and we didn't really get to the message that I wanted to get across. And I can understand why. And sometimes it's the way, as you say, we position it up front. Hopefully it'll make sense to our listeners tonight, is that we get different types of faith, and tonight there's a specific type of faith I'm talking about, especially in the context of creating change in your life. It's under that context. So you were right. It can tend to get more into a sort of a religious faith type of discussion, which is important. And I want to put that out front. It's not that we're saying that's not important. Okay. And that's actually, for many people, that's the only faith they have right now. When you don't have faith in yourself, at least if you have faith in something bigger than yourself, it keeps you going. Yeah. And for many people, that's a really important fact. I would guess that many people have lost faith in many things today, Aubrey. Faith in themselves, faith in the system that promised them growing up that they would have a job and they would have a good future and they'd be able to look after their families. Faith in our government, maybe. There's lots of different things we can have faith. But I think as long as you have that faith in a higher power, that there's going to be that things can still work out, things can still change, I think that gets you going. I think the sad thing is when you lose that faith as well, then it truly does start to feel like all hope is lost for many. So I can really understand why many people, when you talk about faith, that's the first thing they go to, because for many people, that's all they got right now to hold on to. So I get that. But I want to say that tonight, again, I want to talk about more a different type of faith. And I'm going to tell you why I don't want to focus specifically on faith on a higher being, faith on a more religious side, because the challenge with that often is, Aubrey, and I was thinking about that this evening as I was thinking about the show. The challenge with that often is that when we have faith in a power outside of ourselves, having the ability to change things in our lives, that's totally valid and totally it has the power to do that, but not in the way we often think. And that keeps us stuck on a different way. So let me explain that. Many times we put faith that things are going to change in our life to such an extent that we don't actually take action. We sit around waiting for things to happen. And I really believe a saying I was told my whole life growing up: God helps those who help themselves. You'll be given the inspiration. You'll be given the thoughts. You'll even be, the right people will even come across your path if you have that right level of faith and you're vibrating on that right level of faith. But you still got to get up and take the action. You still got to go out there and make something happen. It's not just going to happen by itself. I remember a story or a joke that someone said once where the guy kept praying and saying, please, I just want to win the lotto. Why can't I also be one of those that win the lotto? And he just kept praying and praying and praying, and it just wouldn't happen. And then one day this loud voice came out and said, hey, meet me halfway and at least go buy a ticket. So many times that's exactly what we need to do. We need to go out there and buy the ticket. But if we're relying solely on one type of faith, we can tend to get stuck. And I see this in a lot of people who have faith, but they don't actually go out there and do something about it. Right. So I believe absolutely the right kind of faith will open the doors for you, will make things happen, but you still got to be the one that's got to go and knock on that door. You still got to go and be the one that pushes that handle and pushes the door open. So in order to do that, you need to get to the second faith we're talking about, and that's the faith tonight that I want to talk about, the faith in yourself. Why do people not get up anymore and go knock on those doors? Why don't people get up anymore and do the things that are needed to move their life ahead? It's because they've lost faith in themselves. They've lost faith in their ability to make things happen. And I am suggesting that the same things that build your faith is the things that made you lose your faith. It's there, it's available to you, and it's almost like it doesn't two sides. It obeys what you tell it. So if you tell it all the time, if you tell yourself and build the faith in yourself that you cannot do something, that something isn't possible for yourself, then you start building that truth of that faith, which is the opposite of faith, that doubt in yourself, in the same way that you build faith. So if you can understand how we build doubt, you understand how we build faith. So how do we build doubt? We build doubt by telling ourselves the same negative thing over and over again. We started touching on this last week. So it's like an internal and an external process. So what we started talking about last week is how we keep telling ourselves these negative things in our head over and over again until eventually we believe it. You know, and that's the way we work. That's the way faith is developed. You tell somebody something again and again and again, and eventually, if they've heard it enough times, they believe it. Even though because faith is not a conscious thing. It's a very subconscious, emotional thing. So faith doesn't make sense on a conscious level, but we experience it more on a subconscious feeling level. So consciously, somebody might tell you something that you don't believe to be true, but if you hear it enough times, eventually you start accepting it because the subconscious mind cannot reject, and you start living it as if it's your truth. You just have to look at what's happening. And I was watching a show recently on, and I don't know what people's views on it are, but I always watch very closely what's happening in America, and the kind of things that Donald Trump and the administration there tells people over and over and over again. When in the beginning people know it's not the truth, but when they've heard it, like for example that the 2020 elections was stolen, everybody knows it didn't happen. Right? But he kept saying it so many times over and over and over again that's eventually people started believing it's the truth. And then even if logically they know and they look and they say, but that wasn't the truth, they start believing that it was the truth. And he's even quoted as saying he knows this is how he does. He just tells the same thing, the same lie. This is throughout history. You just tell the same lie
over and over again. Yep.
And eventually people will believe it.
Yeah.
And the same thing when it comes to ourselves. If we tell ourselves the same lie over and over and over again, eventually we will believe it. Eventually we start turning faith into doubt. We tell ourselves we're no good. We tell ourselves there's no jobs out there. We tell ourselves we have no skills. We tell ourselves we have no value. We tell ourselves we don't deserve for good things to happen to us. We tell ourselves all these negative things, and the worst thing is it's happening at such an unconscious, subconscious level deep down that we're not even aware that we're telling ourselves this, because it's become such a normal way for us to think that we don't even think about what we're thinking about anymore. And that's the first level, the internal way we build doubt. And what I'm suggesting tonight is, guess what? In exactly the same way that you built that doubt, you can build faith again. In other words, what am I saying is that the same way you just keep telling yourself something over and over. People call it auto-suggestion. And I had this thought when I was listening, as our Monday night group was going through the book Think and Grow Rich. And Napoleon Hill has a whole chapter on it where he says this is how faith is built. You just keep telling yourself the same thing over and over and over again. But you've got to tell it to yourself with emotion. You can't tell yourself the same thing over and over and not believe it. So the second part is, how do we do that? But I just wanted to preface that with you tonight, Aubrey. This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about faith. Is the reason we don't have faith in ourselves is because we've told ourselves so many times that we can't have a good job, or we can't have money, or we can't look after our family, or we're not a good husband, or we're not a good provider, or we're not a whatever, fill in the blank, that we've now believed in, and it's become a negative faith instead of a positive faith. But what I'm suggesting is, what if you could use that same power consciously and then again start building a positive faith in your future instead of the negative faith that so many people sit with today?
011-883-0702 or 021-446-0567. What have you believed? Yeah. What is the story that you have believed that is literally creating the reality that you have right now? Because that's what I'm hearing you say, Stanley, that whatever we believe, whether it's true or not, becomes true because we give it the power to then create the reality that is commensurate with its fundamental message. So if I believe myself to be wretched of the earth, that I'll never amount to anything, that then I actually start creating that reality that manifests that message. And you're saying that we get to a place where we hear a particular message and we hear it so often until it goes into automatic sort of play, and it becomes an internal reality inside of us. And then we sort of start to give it life. And then life will give us what we believe because our faith makes it true. Is that what you say?
Yes, Aubrey. But you also then need to understand the other side of it.
Yep.
So what happens, and maybe I can also explain that quickly to you, because I think sometimes we miss the whole picture and then it might not make sense. So what happens on the other side is that people with power that make things happen, right, they also have doubts. You know, successful people also wake up, believe it or not, with doubts.
Yeah.
They also wake up with fears. They also wake up, but what makes them different? So now let's look at this person who's now, maybe they had faith before and they were making things happen, but now they start seeing the results aren't quite the way they want. So what happens is the person starts thinking, what's the point? I'm no good. Nobody wants to hire me. Nobody's even wants to I've sent out so many CVs, and I hear this all the time. Sent out so many CVs. Nobody gets back to me. Now, people might not say this, but they're thinking it must mean that I'm no good. So they start thinking these things, right? Now what happens is that they get to a point where your thinking and your feelings start becoming more powerful than your actions. So what does that mean? The person wakes up when every day they were getting up and they were doing things that, yes, fair enough, they might not be getting that response in their CV. I mean, we can talk again about another angle, like maybe it's time to change your approach. Maybe it's time to change the way you're doing your CV. Maybe we've spoken about these things before. Maybe it's time for you to look at the way you're approaching organizations and researching and applying for these positions. That's a whole different conversation. But now, at least if you're sending your CV out, even though you might not be getting the kind of responses yet that you want, at least you're still in the game, you know. But now the person wakes up and suddenly their thinking and feeling is becoming a little bit more powerful than their action. What does that mean? Now suddenly they're not sending the CV out anymore. Suddenly they're not knocking on those doors anymore. So now they've gone from giving themselves at least a small chance of something happening to giving themselves no chance of something happening, because they're just not taking the action anymore. In other words, they are not doing what they know they should be doing to at least give themselves a chance to make something happen. So what happens is their power starts going down. Now they wake up every morning and they know they're supposed to be making some phone, or they know they're supposed to be sending out their CV, or they know they're supposed to be looking in the job ads, or whatever it might be, fill in the blank. I know I'm supposed to be making more phone calls to get clients in my business. I know I'm supposed to be whatever it might be, right? Now what happens is at a subconscious mind level, you start picking up, I'm not doing the things I know I should be doing. So you start feeling guilt. You start feeling shame. Your confidence starts becoming a knock. So the internal faith starts affecting the external faith. You're not taking action anymore. Now what's happening, it's becoming like this vicious circle. You are observing, and because you're taking less action, you're seeing even less return. So now because you're seeing even less return, now it's affirming what you're saying to yourself in your mind. There are no jobs, there are no opportunities, and it starts becoming this vicious circle, right? Because your faith doesn't just get broken down internally, it then starts getting broken down externally, because now you're not even taking action anymore. Now, as I said, you're not even at least giving yourself a chance that somebody might see your CV, or somebody might like what you have to say, or that client, that one phone call that you didn't feel like making might be the one person client that picks up and said, this is wonderful. I was looking for a product just like yours. But because you're not even in the game anymore, your faith now, both internally and externally, has made you a person that has become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's what I'm talking about. So it becomes this vicious circle. And I want to just come back quickly to what I said as I started this part of it, is that successful people, they also feel fear. They also feel doubt. They also get up those days when they don't feel like making those phone calls. They don't feel like knocking on those doors. But the thing that makes people powerful and that builds their faith is people who have the ability to act despite their thinking and feeling. And I'm willing to say that everybody started there. Everybody had fears and doubts, and then they started, and slowly but surely the faith started eroding. And tonight it comes back to our question, is this you listening to the show? Are you one of those people whose faith has completely eroded? And what can we do to start building that faith again lies in the same answer to what did you do to turn that faith into doubt in the first place.
To what extent do external conditions play a role in galvanizing the story that diminishes our faith? So in other words, if the reality externally is that the economy is on a downward slope, if the reality is that the policies and the priorities for the spending of money are such that they create a reality where there are fewer options and fewer opportunities, and that's why every time I write a CV, companies are not hiring me because they are not doing as well as they should be doing in order to absorb me. To what extent is that reality? Yeah, because I know that we're talking mainly here about the internal reality of the individual, but there is also the external reality in which that individual who has an internal reality lives, right? To what extent does that external reality play a role in the story that we believe that manifests a particular reality? Talk to me about that.
My answer to that would be it's going to play as big a role as what you allow it to play, Aubrey. There are people that are getting up every day facing the same reality, yet not allowing that to dictate their lives, right? That reality of outside, there's no jobs and the economy is becoming slow. The same person that's out there making a success of their lives against all circumstances is facing the same reality. But to what extent is that person allowing that reality to influence them? Remember, I said to you a while back, and I wish I could, if there were one message I could get across to everybody out there that's not finding the job. Remember, I said to you once, stop looking for a job and start looking for an income. It's not a job you want. We think we want the job. It's not the job you want.
Talk to me about that again, because I remember somebody called in and said, listen, I've done everything. I've done everything twice. I've gone to school for 12 years. I've gotten my degree. I've done everything I was told to do in order for me to be able to be gainfully employed. And for the last 6 years, I have not had a job. And then you replied to say that maybe that is a sign that yours is not to get a job, and therefore begin to ask a different question. Instead of how can I get a job, ask the question, how can I? What was your question?
How can I make an income?
And maybe one of the issues is that we think that the only way to make an income is to have a job.
Yeah. And we're thinking that more and more in a world where jobs are becoming more and more scarce. The traditional way of working is moving on, Aubrey. The traditional way today is the way more and more people worldwide are going, because globally there are less and less jobs. The people who get up every day and make something happen are the ones that realize, and remember, what are our two words this year that we're focusing on? I always want to come back to it whenever I can. Positioning and flow. The ones that are making it out there are realizing the money is always flowing. It always has to. That's what the world is about. Money flows. Money is a representation
That's
of
why it's
value.
called a
There will
currency,
always be
eh?
money. A currency. They're wonderful. I love that connection.
Yeah.
It's always flowing.
Yeah.
But you need to be asking yourself, am I still sitting in the flow? I mean, I think of this book, and I don't know if you ever read it, and I would really recommend people to go and read it. It's a very simple book to read, but it's got a very powerful message. It's called Who Moved My Cheese?
Yeah, I've read Remove My Cheese, yeah.
Very good book, right? And for those who haven't read it, just to set
Tiny
the context
little
of it,
book with a very powerful big message, yeah?
exactly. And I think it's time for people to read that book again. So Who Moved My Cheese? And I'm gonna invite anybody who wants to know where to get that book. I'm gonna give my details at the end of this session, as I always do. Mail me. I'll send you. I'll give you a copy of the book to start reading. And that book really, I even realized I needed to start reading that again just to get that message. And what it was about is this mouse that was in this cage with another mouse. I think there were two of them, and there would always be cheese that would be fed to them. And they never had to do anything. They were happy. The cheese was always there. Every morning when they wake up, there's their cheese. And then the one morning they woke up and there's no more cheese. And they sat waiting for the cheese, and the next day, no more cheese. The next day, no. And after about a week of this, however long it was, they started getting worried, thinking, but where's the cheese? Who moved the cheese? And so they sit, and then the one mouse eventually decides he's got to walk down this maze and go and look for other cheese because the cheese isn't coming. But the other mouse keeps sitting there and thinking, you know what? The cheese will eventually come. It's always been there. I've just got to, if I just wait long enough, the cheese will come. And then eventually the one mouse goes and he finds a whole store of cheese elsewhere, but being willing to go down the maze. That's very symbolic of how we are today. So many of us are still sitting in that little room where we see the cheese isn't coming anymore. The jobs aren't there anymore. But instead of going out there and saying, maybe it's time to find another path, maybe it's time to find another way to make an income, we sit there the whole time waiting for the cheese. And I want to say to people today, it's time to stop waiting for the cheese to come. It's not going to come. If it hasn't come now yet, what's going to suddenly make it different tomorrow? It's time for you to start thinking differently. It's time for you to ask the question, but where is the cheese today? And that's what I want people to say, is that don't lose faith in yourself, right? See that things have changed. See that circumstances outside of you have changed. And what Wallace Wattle say in The Science of Getting Rich? People are always blaming circumstances for their condition in life. He says the people who are successful, they go out there and they look for the circumstances that meet what they need. And if they can't find them, they create them. So we need to start thinking different, but we're not going to do that if we've stopped having faith in ourselves, if we've stopped believing that things are possible for ourselves. So that is why for many of us, the first step again is to rekindle that faith. And how do we do that? Well, we do it through the two ways that you create doubt. Number one, you wake up every day and you start talking different in your mind. You start creating a new way of talking to yourself. You start telling yourself it's possible again. You start telling yourself, I don't need a job, I need an income. And you tell yourself every day and you start, what can I do to create an income for myself? And the second thing is you start taking action. Even if it's the smallest action, you start learning something, a new skill on YouTube. You start learning about this whole AI revolution. I'm telling you, this AI revolution, there's a job for everybody in it. If they or an income for everybody, if they just start opening up their mind to what's possible. But in other words, you start doing something tomorrow that's different. And you start building that faith again. And if you cannot do that, then you're going to be stuck waiting for one day when that cheese comes again, which for many people is never going to come.
Give us a call, 011-883-0702. Does this conversation make some sense to you? What have you believed? What is the story that is the abiding story that defines you and your place in the world? Yeah? And is it possible to change that story in order for you to get into the flow, as Stanley speaks? Because it appears to me that maybe the flow that we have gotten used to has dried up, and we just need to go and find where the flow is happening elsewhere. That perhaps we are waiting for the cheese to come when the cheese has already moved. We've got to move with the cheese. I really recommend that you get that book, Who Moved My Cheese? It's a tiny little book. I think it's about 40, 50 pages. Tiny little book. Read it many, many, many years ago. Very impactful. Give me a call, 011-883-0702. How do you regain your faith in yourself? Not in the religious sense, but in the sense that how do you gain the fortitude, the power to be able to move and do things that will provide you with the results that you want for your life? And it appears that it all starts with, what do you believe about yourself? Who do you believe you are? What do you answer to? Do you answer to the idea that you are the person that must get a job? Or do you answer to the more refined call that says you must be the person who generates an income? Give me a call, 011-883-0702. Stanley Beckett is my guest. I want to read you some of the messages that have come through. Bill Graham says, why read a book about mice and cheese when your guest has explained it in 30 seconds? Says Bill Graham. Well, maybe there's more to it than just the explanation that you heard in 30 seconds, Bill. But hey, look, if it's not for you, it's not for you, and that's okay. Lebo says, Dumela Ntate Aubrey. Your question just now on doing a CV and sending it being so messed up and not getting a response. I've been doing that and it makes super sense. But to be employed proper, man, it messes with your mind. What if I am not the one that is supposed to be starting a company? It's a real thing, thanks to you and Mr. Beckett. Yeah, I suppose those are the questions that then arise, Stanley. That in the same way that we are asking the question, maybe the reason why you're not getting a response from people that you're asking for a job from is a hint by reality that maybe you shouldn't be looking for a job. You should be looking for a way to create income. But Lebo is turning that same question around and saying, but how do I know that it means that I'm just supposed to be looking for business? And I think that's where we need to spend a bit of time talking about the idea of an income versus a job.
Yeah, absolutely, Aubrey. And you know what, that's a great question. And I absolutely hear what people are saying. And sometimes I am concerned that I can come across sometimes as making these concepts too simplistic. But I think we need to start from somewhere. And what I would say to someone, and I think you said it was Lebo or something like that was the name, and to everybody out there, what you need to do, what your number one thing is to do is not focus solely on getting a job. Okay. If it's meant to come that way, it will come that way. What you must do is get yourself back into the flow of making an income again. So, you know, don't start big if you're not there ready for that yet. Start small. Say, what if you could put yourself a challenge and say, what can I do tomorrow? What can I do the next week just to make 10 rand? Just that. What can I do? What could I sell? What could I buy and then resell? What could I, just start somewhere, because the person was also saying, not everybody is meant to build a business. I agree, but everybody can make an income somehow. Doesn't mean you have to create a business, but start thinking, just get yourself into the flow, because what happens when you start getting in that flow, and like if you haven't made money, and 10 rand might not sound a lot, but let me tell you, if you haven't made money in a long time and you suddenly just make 10 rand, that could be a world of difference to you. That can suddenly start igniting something inside of you. But often we look at things that we have no control over. And that severely influences our faith, severely influences and makes us doubt, because we're focusing on the things we don't control. Start focusing on the thing you can control. What if I said everybody who's sitting there looking for that job and feels like I want to give up and I don't know what to do? What if your challenge for the next week until next week Wednesday was just to go and make 50 rand in the next week somehow? What would you do? Could you sell? What if you needed that 50 rand? Let's say, and you needed it to save your life. You had a doctor for some other reason said, listen, you've got XYZ problem and it's going to cost you 50 rand and I can save your life. I promise you would find a way to get that 50 rand. So see it in that same way. You're saving your faith. You're saving that your financial future by doing this. Go out there and just start getting into the flow. Stop asking, what can I do to do a job? I don't mean stop doing the things to get a job, but stop making that your same focus. Build the faith in yourself again, but just do it small. And so I'll start there, and I'll to that person who wrote that in, and to everybody else there that's sitting feeling despondent at the moment. Put your focus for the next week just on that one challenge. How can you make 50 Rand this next week? Don't worry about how right now. Just set the goal and say, I am going to somehow make an income of just 50 Rand this next week. And you'll be amazed if you do that. Suddenly the next week you can say, okay, how can I make 100 Rand instead of 50 Rand? The next thing you think, how can I make 500 Rand instead of 100 Rand? But start somewhere. Don't just sit around telling yourself there's no jobs, there's no future, there's no hope, because that then becomes the fulfilled prophecy. So I'm hoping that if some people might even take up this challenge and come back to us and say, you know what, I took on the challenge, I went and I made the first 50 Rand. I didn't think I was able to, but suddenly I did X, Y, or Z, or I sold A, B, or C, and I saw, wow, if I start selling things, and then I took that money and I bought something else, I mean, that's going to be the story of our book, How to Turn Your Bicycle into a Porsche. We're going to tell how that was possible. But that's really what I want to say to people is start somewhere. Don't just sit there doing nothing, because nothing can change unless you change. And you won't change unless you have some level of faith. So just build that faith slowly again, and you'll be amazed how a 50 Rand made in 1 week can turn into something completely different in a year or two from now. But start somewhere.
All right. Della says, Aubrey, can you producers please call me? I have a story related to this topic tonight. That's beautiful. Just give me a call.
I like that.
I like that. I really do. I like that kind of
That's cool.
It's very, very cool. I don't know if you can call Della, who's in that thing. I wish we can. If we can, I'd love to hear from Della.
Well, I've got a feeling we want to hear the story.
Absolutely. So give me a call. I'm always saying, give me a call. She says, no, you call me. That's good stuff, man. I dig it. I love it. Angie says, good evening. May I please have Stanley's WhatsApp number, please? Regards. And that's from Dimpomokwe, 9 Midrand. Well, Dimpo, if you listen to the end, we'll definitely have that number. Many years ago, when I was still doing maybe later, I had the conversation with the listeners about the difference between a job and work. And I realized from that conversation that particularly us in South Africa are still very much caught up in the idea that work of necessity is a job. And I want to suggest that it is possible to have work, but not necessarily a job. Because a job is a particular thing, it's a specific thing. Yes, in a job, you can do work, but work is a different thing. And since we are playing around in some of the ideas that can be found in theology or in religion, there's a very famous story in biblical text that speaks about Adam, or the man, who worked. And interesting that the work was there even before the fall, such that a lot of people think that work is a punishment that comes after the fall. I want to argue that the job is the punishment that comes after the fall. But work is the very thing that we were created to do. And it sounds to me, see, I'm getting all religious now, but it sounds to me that ours, and particularly in South Africa and maybe throughout the world, is that there's the confusion about the difference between work and the job. And because we've been so conditioned to understand that the only way that I can have an income is through a job, when somebody says, look for a way of making an income, our minds immediately say, look for a job, when in fact you're saying, look for work. So, suppose what I'm going to ask you now, Stanley, is what is the difference between work and a job?
You know, I'll tell you why it's sometimes hard for me to answer that question, because the last time I had a job was more than 15 years ago. So I can't remember.
He's a
exactly
loafer,
what
man.
job
He's
it
a loafer.
You know, whenever people are talking about being unemployed, I say, yo, I've been unemployed for more than 15 years. I think it's because I realized that the thing you're talking about today is that I've got three big goals in life, like three big ones. And one of them is to live a life that I don't need a vacation from. And to me, when you have a job, you always need a vacation. You're always counting down the days for the weekend. You're always counting down the days for when that vacation time is coming, right? Because most people don't love what they do every day. They get up and it's a means to an end. For me, the difference between job and work that you love is I don't need a vacation from what I do. I love what I do. I get up every day and I've probably to a fault proven this already. I will do what I love for free. I just love it. I love working with, I love the work I do every day, but I've realized I have to ask money for it as well. But the truth is, Aubrey, I would get up every day and do what I did even if you didn't pay me. And I wonder how many people feel exactly the same way about their jobs that they have. How many people, if they were suddenly not paid, would get up every day and still do what they were doing? I think if you can find that, you've already solved such a beautiful part of life.
Well, listen.
And I don't think it's possible. Sorry?
You were just going to finish what you were going to say, but Ntateng found Della. Can you believe it? Della, who said, listen, give me a call. Ntateng has found
I'd love to hear Della's story. I'm happy to pause and hear Della's story.
All right.
It's going to be a good one.
Della, thanks very much for I think the word is provoking us. Thank you very much. We think that your message had a lot of chutzpah. What do you have to tell us, Della?
Good evening, Aubrey. Yeah. So my story tonight is what I relate to what is being said tonight on the radio. I was also looking for a job for many months and weeks and years on end.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find a job. I'm over 50. I still have children at home. And I applied for the 350 grant, SRD grant.
Yeah.
And you go to the spaza shops in the location, you buy a little sugar, little rice, little this and this.
Yeah.
And in 5 days' time, it's over.
Finished, yeah.
Yes, and then you have to start again. So I decided I'm not going to do this to myself anymore. I need an income. And I need to set a path for myself. So what I did was I walked when, the message came in, your SRD money is in. I walked to a place where you buy all kinds of snacks and, sweets and things like that. I didn't know what I was doing. And then when I came back, I said, Della, you made a terrible mistake here. You went to go and buy snacks and stuff to sell. Where are you going to sell it? There is no food at home. And then I didn't know what was happening. It was like, it was just, I cannot relate to you what happened. And then I stayed opposite the park. So I came into the house. I said, I'm going to just take this empty 2 buckets. I'm going to put it in the park and I'm going to start selling these things. Obviously, I bought it to sell it. And I started there and that just built my faith. And I mean, I'm at a point today, Aubrey, where I can buy stock for 1,500 rand.
Wow.
I didn't know I'm going to end up when they evicted us at the school with this whole poisoning of stuff and children and that. I said, no one is going to dictate to me when and how I must eat. I'm just going to apply my mind to what I'm going to do. And then I just took my trolley, threw all my bags on my back, and I just started to scream, Della's mobile shop.
Oh,
and
my.
as I was going all the streets past the school, when I come back, my bags and my trolley is empty. And yeah, that is my story.
And your
today,
cup runneth over, Della. Huh?
oh, it is not running over, it is pouring over. So
You know
yes,
what?
Stanley,
I knew there was something about you when you said, listen, call me.
I
Yes,
just want to
I
say,
said-
Aubrey, there to Della, that's such an amazing story. And I would love for Della to contact me, because she is the kind of person we're writing our book about.
Yeah.
And I'd love a real story like hers, to talk to and tell people. There's how many people that get those grants every month that could have done exactly the same thing Della does. But Della
Yes.
did it. And
yes,
she
and
didn't
you
sit
know,
back and make
Stanley,
excuses. Yes.
sorry, I just wanted to say there were days when I felt I can't do this. I can't get up. I'm tired. This is, I just cannot do it. But then I just decided I need to show up every day, because I am not doing this for people to see,
Yep.
but I'm doing it for them to learn
Yep.
and to understand that it can be done.
That's
Well,
so
let me
beautiful.
tell you. Let me quickly read this for you both from Thabo in Centurion, which is the last point Della makes. It says, "Evening, Braops, and your esteemed guest. Very informative topic indeed. Human nature is conditioned to comparison to others. How can one avoid such comparison and start focusing on achieving goals?" Says Thabo in Centurion. And I think that's what you're saying, that you got to a point where you didn't care how
No.
people were going to perceive you when you
No.
go around screaming Della's
Mobile shop.
or whatever the case may
Yes.
be.
I couldn't care.
Absolutely. So we got to get to that point where we are no longer products of other people's opinions of us, and really start living out who we are, I think is what you're saying to us, Della.
Yes,
And
definitely.
Aubrey, can I say something to Della quickly? Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm so excited about this story.
Very excited.
Della could actually take this and create a nationwide movement called Della's. We could have a Della all over the place. You take that
True.
same spirit and put it into people out there that feel nothing is possible. I just love the story, and I just want to hear more about it from Della.
Della, will you get in touch with Stanley, or we'll put you guys together? We're going to give Stanley's contact details, but I think it would be really wonderful to have your story documented as an inspirational story to other people. Della, thank you so much.
Oh, definitely.
And I love your chutzpah. I love the fact that you told us to call you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Della in Joburg. I don't know how Ntateng found her, but there it is. I got it on my socials. She says, call me. Call me. I'll tell you a story. Now, I know that somebody's thinking, Della's story is not that inspirational. Yeah? I know, I can almost feel somebody saying that. Lots of people have done what Della have done. The question is, why haven't you done it for your circumstances? Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you must go and sell snacks. But could it be that for you there is a niche work that you must do? I think that the work is self-actualization. It is the rising above the societal expectations for me and being who I actually am. That's our work. And it is to find the instrument or the vehicle that is going to get you there. In Della's case, it was to sell snacks. What is yours? What is your work? Stanley, we're going to continue with this conversation in the next hour as to the difference between a job and work. As we close, what is your final message and how do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, my final message is just what a wonderful way to end it. Della was exactly what we were saying tonight. She didn't let the doubt overcome her. She had faith in herself and she knew, I have to do something. and she did it, and she overcame all the fears and all the doubts, and she was willing to put herself out there. If she can do it, and I can hear, and at her age, she said over 50, then there's no excuse for anyone out there. And, you know, anyone who wants to get a hold of me and chat about this further and get a copy of the book, Who Moved My Cheese, just can email me, Stanley at changecreatorsa.com, Stanley at changecreatorsa.com.